Hey everybody, welcome back to the Modern Trumpeter Podcast. You may not have heard of our guest this week, but you certainly have heard him and his playing. Please let me introduce you to Mark Rudin. Mark Rudin is a trumpet player and multi-instrumentalist based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Originally from Los Angeles, California, Mark has had a wide and versatile career within the music industry, much of which we will cover in today's episode. He has had extensive experience with a recording studio, particularly doing horn sessions out of his home studio. Most recently, he has recorded on Olivia Dean's album, Art of Loving. He has also recorded horns for Sabrina Carpenter's most recent single, Tears, and has also recorded for artists such as Meghan Trainor, Beanie, Lennon Stella, Amber Mark, and many more. He also recently recorded a track for the brand new Mario Galaxy movie. And if you are new to the podcast, comment your favorite part of the interview below. And if you know another trumpet player who would be interested in the podcast, please share it with them. In addition to this podcast, we are writing a book called The Modern Trumpeter, a guide to building a versatile and successful career. This book will be available by the end of the year and covers the ins and outs of how to make it as a trumpet player in this day and age. With insights and quotes from over 50 professional trumpet players in the industry, their real-world experience and advice can help you know what you need to do to get your music career to become a reality. Now, here is my interview with Mark Rudin. Hey everybody, welcome back again to the Modern Trumpeter Podcast. Today we are speaking with trumpet player Mark Rudin. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about your story and like what you've done. I've seen a little bit of online and as we've talked about what you do and whatnot, but I'm excited to really dive into that. But first off, can you tell us how you got started in music, how you got started in the trumpet, and at what point in your life you're like, I want to pursue this?
Yeah. Somehow I was just drawn to playing a wind instrument. I think the moment was the 1989 Grammys where Kenny G was playing on them. I mean, the Grammys used to be such an awesome show. There would be like Wynton Marsalis was on it that year, I think, or the year before too. Wow. And so you were exposed to that stuff on TV, like really cool. And I don't know, I think it was like Kenny G playing with Michael Bolton and then Lisa Simpson, probably the other biggest like thing, like just seeing her playing the Barry sax or something. And so I wanted to play the sax, and this was probably, a year or two before you go into beginning band. And so I knew that was coming, 6th grade beginning band, and got in, of course, signed up for band, and it seemed like everybody wanted to play the sax. So I just kind of was like, it'll be easier if I just say I'll play the trumpet. Somehow in my head I knew I'll just learn the sax later. Awesome. I don't know how I had that insight so young, but I did, and I was like, that's something we'll get into as a multi-instrumentalist, but I always kind of knew in my head that I could learn other instruments, but I wanted to play. I thought trumpet was cool. It was also not everybody was lined up to play it like they were with the saxophones.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I just went with it. And where I grew up in Southern California, I went to Agora High and just so happened to have an amazing band director there, and he put together what's still a pretty well-known band program these days. It's grown incredibly. They have 3 jazz band classes alone, and so, there was a lot of people who were serious about doing music that I came up with just in high school alone.
Yeah.
That's how I got started. Yeah.
Wow. Trumpet first, and then was there any point in, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say trumpet. So what happened was I started playing trumpet, and then I started learning a little piano on my own, a little keyboard. And right around when I got into high school, I'd get together with friends and just jam. We would just, not even jazz, just trying to jam funky jams and whatever, psychedelics. Yeah. And I'd have my trumpet, and I very quickly, and also in jazz, whenever I'd play in a quartet or a quintet or something, there was just something about playing the trumpet playing the head, playing a solo, and then, like sitting off to the side where I was just always envious of the bass player or the drummer. So I wanted to learn bass pretty quickly. So that's what I would consider my second instrument was playing the bass.
Bass, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I have to ask, how many instruments do you play then?
It's easier to say what I don't play.
I love it. That's great.
I don't play anything that you use a bow to play, and I don't play anything that you use a double reed to play, and I don't play clarinet.
Because why the clarinet? If you play saxophone, why would you learn the clarinet? Oh, that's great. And so, as you've been developing and whatnot, at what point did you start adding other instruments after the bass? You started learning the saxophone, trombone, etc. Did they come all at once or in stages?
No, it was all in stages. It's a good question. The next instrument, I would say, other than, fiddling around on the piano. I also bought a set of congas when I was in high school and wanted to learn them like legitimately. And so I learned them from a video and practiced all the time. I bought a VHS on how to play the congas. And I can't think of the name of the trumpet player, but I went and saw this trumpet player. I mean, I saw Dizzy Gillespie playing the congas once too, That's a perfect instrument to go along with the trumpet. Other than that, kind of getting into percussion was flute. And so freshman year in college, I grew up in Southern California. I went to college at University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And in the dorms, we would, obviously I'm hanging out with the musicians. And there was a friend of mine who was a guitar major, and he had a flute, and I don't know why he didn't want it anymore, but I traded him one of those old clip-on microphones with a cord on it for the flute because he had also played bass, and he wanted to use it as a pickup for his upright bass. But yeah, I got the flute. And the thing about the flute was like a huge revelation because when I first picked it up, right here in the right hand, the fingering is E, F, F sharp, G, which is just insane. So immediately I had the facility, and as long as I can make a sound, I'm like, whoa, I play, at least these 4 notes chromatically pretty well. And so I just kind of took it from there and always loved the sound, and so flute was a big double for me, especially after college. I played in a band. I had my own band with my friends from college that we started. It was original music called Town Hall. I'd jump on the flute a lot, and we were very eclectic and outside of the normal, touring band.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. So what did you get your degree in at that university?
So I was there for trumpet. It was a jazz program, and I went there. When I was in high school, I studied I would take lessons with Bobby Shew. I lived in Southern California, so this is when I was in high school. I'd drive out to Bobby Shew's, and I studied with him from when I was 15 and even once I went to college, I'd come back and go take lessons with him. But that was for trumpet. But in terms of learning jazz, I studied with a guy named Bijon Watson, who was a saxophone woodwind guy. He's from Philly. He was famous for being Michael Brecker's sax teacher. And that's who like everybody in my town studied with because he was like the best, in terms of learning jazz from. So he recommended that I audition at UArts, and so I went for trumpet. And the first year I was there, I studied with a guy named Rick Kerber, who was awesome. It was really cool because and we should probably circle back around to this, but like I only studied with Bobby Shew, was the only trumpet teacher I ever had, other than like my first teacher who was like in high school, and another kind of guy I studied with for a minute. When I started taking lessons with Rick in college, he was like, you need to like get an etude book and actually open the Arvin's book, and I owned it, but like he was like giving me trumpet lessons, other than, the stuff I learned with Bobby was like kind of the stuff we all know him for, the trumpet doctor, learning the yoga breath and a little bit more technical stuff about the trumpet. I was also really young and wasn't able to retain it and, too well. I was just excited to study with him, and we did a lot of jazz. Like we would just play Jamie Aebersold's and talk for 2 hours, and then a sad thing is that Rick, my teacher, he passed away um, right at the beginning of my sophomore year.
Oh wow.
And
Jeez.
yeah, and he was the one that I auditioned for, and part of the reason why I went there. And so then I started studying with John Swana, who's an incredible jazz trumpet player that not a lot of people know of, but awesome. Like I had his records in high school, his CDs, and I studied with him. And then I started a band with my friends in college, and we just decided to pursue that. And so we all probably within like an 8 to 9 month period dropped out of school to
Oh
pursue our
wow.
band. Yeah. And so I actually didn't get a degree.
Wow. So no degrees at all. Wow, that's crazy. And here's a question for you. Like a lot of people I talk to, like they need, especially if you want to teach at a university, you need some sort of degree. Mostly nowadays a master's and almost now pretty much a doctorate. And so as far as teaching goes, but there's a lot of players who don't pursue that teaching route and are just players who don't have a degree. What are your thoughts on a music degree and kind of making a career out of music? Is it necessary? Would you recommend it? Kind of just your thoughts all on that.
Yeah. I say it's kind of two parts. Like, first of all, just like you said, I think that if you want that teaching job, that good teaching job, and that's something that you want to have, then 100% you're going to have to get your degree as the fastest way. All that said, I had instructors, professors in college that didn't have their degree. They'll at a certain point, experience can kind of equal that, but then it's like, okay, you're gonna have to go out and get 20, 30 years of experience before you're hired at a university, and those yeah. So like obviously, everybody that I knew that was there in the master's program, because they had a pretty cool they had a 5 year degree master path to get a master's degree at UArts. They're all music teachers now, and so and they play,
Yeah.
like most teachers I know, everybody still plays gigs out there and stuff, but they're all music teachers. For me, uh my experience of just being like, all right, I'm just gonna go be in the music industry was more valuable because, as soon as I started doing that, we were a independent band. We all had to like learn how to, get out there and book gigs and tour, and we bought our own van, and we all lived in the same house and bought our own van and trailer and promoted ourselves. And this is before, like we didn't even really have MySpace. This was like in the early days. We didn't even have cell phones. We had a map that we would follow, like a written map to get around the country. And then we had to learn to make our album, and figure out how to fund it at first, and then get into the studio and figure out how to record. And from there, it was like a good time because it's right around the time when Pro Tools was early Pro Tools days, early digital recording days. It was like everything was changing. The music industry was changing so much during that time. This was like right around 2000, 2001. Being in the industry, from, having our, being down there on the war field, was absolutely necessary to like where I am today. And just kind of taking it from there. I don't think that 2 more years of school would have benefited me for what I'm doing now.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the debate that a lot of people, I think, kind of go through is like, should I go to school for this or should I go and get experience? And some people do both. Some people end up, Michael Sachs, who I just talked to, he got a history degree. He plays principal for the Cleveland Orchestra, right? He's been for almost 40 years. And then Bijon Watson, he's teaching at Berklee College of Music, but he has like a computer science degree or something like that. And so it's like, sometimes it doesn't necessarily matter. I think, and it's so hard. I think it depends on each person and their situation, but like it's just kind of the theme of the podcast and the book is like there's no one set way to do things, but you just got to figure out what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, I will say that I had two parts to that. The second part is that go to college. You know, like you said, even if you're going to go study something else or anything, the experience and the opportunity of, especially if you're going to, I mean, like, even in your own town, whatever, but like I went from Los Angeles to Philadelphia. I met like new people. I experienced new things. The social growth that you get just from that first year is worth it. I mean, don't beat yourself up if it's not for you and you don't want to stick around and get a degree, or like maybe you'll find something else that you love, like computer science or something, and you can get a degree, and then you can skip a lot of years of misery trying to make it just as a musician. But yeah, I mean, like I don't want to write off going to college at all, because that experience in itself is so, I think, is like that, like I wouldn't be where I am without that either. That's where I met my bandmates. That's where I got this new perspective on music, and introduced to so much different music from my friends. And
no, I agree 100%. Like there's so many people that I met in school that it's like, I wouldn't have met so many people. I wouldn't have done so many other things. Even just meeting with the professor. You moved to town before, after my jazz professor left. His name's Alex Heitlinger. He's teaching out in Texas now, but he was great, and he's one of the first ones who was like, okay, hey, let me refer you for this gig in town. Here's this yada yada yada, and that was like my first like pro gig, and I'm like, oh, am I ready for this? But like then
absolutely.
Then that was like the first thing. So like without him helping me, teaching me, and then helping me get going, like it would have taken a lot longer for me to start doing stuff around town.
Absolutely. I had the same experience. As soon as I got there, I was playing wedding gigs and subbing for wedding gigs for the other trumpet players at UArts, and getting professional gigs like right away. It's really big there in Philadelphia, New Jersey area. Wedding bands.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the book about wedding bands and all that good stuff too. Okay, so tell me more about the band and what you guys did. How long did that go for, and what was your experience? And also, and maybe part two of this question, you talked a little bit about having to find your own gigs, do your own promoting, and kind of have to be like self-sufficient. And how did those skills help you later on in your career that you developed?
Yeah, so we were pretty serious, and the way the band started was through like jams that we would have at our apartments, and we would just have these jams, and eventually we were playing jazz. We were in jazz. We were a bunch of guys in jazz school, and I'm a huge jazz guy. I'm a jazz guy at heart. That's where I came up, and that's what I listened to. But by the time I got to college, like people would be like, "What are you listening to?" I'd be like, "I'm listening to the Beatles," like because I had never listened to them. I wanted to experience, all these things that people, I heard are just so amazing. The Beatles and Bob Dylan and Neil Young and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I was a big, like Earth, Wind and Fire and Steely Dan and James Brown, all the horn, bands when I was in high school and stuff, but like not like more like of this like songwriting world. And through those jams, we sort of created this band. There'd be a lot of people at the jams, but then there was like, we kind of put together a core group, and our idea was, okay, what's 5 jazz majors' idea of being in like a rock band? Like, and it was literally like we'd sound like a different band on every song, because we just didn't really have like one style that we would play necessarily. The influences were very vast, and one of the main things, we were all multi-instrumentalists. The only person that didn't change instruments every song was the drummer. So we'd be like that, I'd be playing bass and singing on a song, and then the next song I'd be playing trumpet behind a set of congas, and like I'd pick up an accordion or a harmonica or the flute, and another guy played trumpet and bass and mandolin, and another guy played bass and banjo, and so that's one of our things that we had, was we were just like one of those we were like musical chairs on our instruments.
Yeah, that's wild. So how long were you guys together and doing stuff then?
We were together for almost 7 years, and you asked about like figuring things out on our own. We had a manager, booking agent that we worked with. So that was, I mean, there's something that to know that you can't do these things on your own. You really can't be your own manager, or especially your own booking agent. You do need to like sort of, I mean, hire is like, I use that term loosely because this was a different time, and we didn't make any money doing this. We didn't make, like, we made enough money. Like I said, we all lived in the same house. We had a van and trailer just to like keep, like, I don't know how we bought food. Like, I can't remember because I never once like remember actually like getting more than like a $20 bill in a week for so, but like that's how we got gigs. But the big thing that came out of that was us learning to record ourselves and make our own music, because just being a live band, back in that day, at that time, we were just going around. We would do all types of gigs. We would open for big bands, big artists, but then sometimes we would drive 10 hours to play in Charleston and for two people, or for the sound guy, and do that. So it's like not necessarily getting you anywhere, just getting you that experience, I guess. But we were all very interested in making recordings, but at the time it was expensive. Home recording wasn't really a thing yet. So we were basically like getting our first computers and stuff just to get Pro Tools and build it. We built a little studio in the house. And one of the guys in the band was excelled at that very well. And so we all learned from him, and not all of us. There's three of us that got into recording. And like I never owned a computer myself, and so I bought my first computer just so I could get Pro Tools, just so I can start figuring out how to use it and do this recording thing, and that was like a huge thing for us. And then by our third album, we were doing most of the recording at home. By the time we broke up, the reason we broke up was because we started the band when we were 19, and now we're 26 years old, 25, 26 years old, still not making any money. Still, it just was a long, hard path. We learned a lot, got a lot of experience. I met a lot of people that I still work with today. But we were like, we needed lives, we needed like to be able to have girlfriends and stuff, like
Yeah.
and I mean, like, it was tough because most of the people we knew, they were 25, 26 at that time, they're getting jobs, they're making some kind of a living and things like that. So it just kind of ran its course, and all went on our separate ways.
Makes sense. And but like you said, like, it sounds like those years were like foundational and formative for everything else you're going to do later on in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was able to go from, I just played in a band making records for 6.5 years to like, I'm moving back to LA and reaching out to anybody that I knew that does, producers and songwriters and things, and being like, hey, let's work. I just, I already had that. Like, I came from that world now.
Yeah. Yeah. So after the band broke up, where did you end up, and what was next for you?
Yeah. So when the band broke up, then I was like, all right, time to go home. I've been in Philly for 8 years, and I went back to LA, and I figured I would just like put myself out there as a musician, and build my home recording studio, at the time, which is very basic, like we're just talking, just like start and continue a songwriter at that point, and early in my producing years. And so I've just like find a place where I could set up and get going and just start. And I would reach out, like I said, when I was in high school, there's a lot of guys that were really serious. And so I reached out to my friends and found out, one of my good friends, Julie Bonetta, is, still producing music, one of the biggest producers there is today. And he started calling me for horn sessions.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was already doing like major label stuff. And so I started doing horn sessions. That's when that really started out there. And this was like in person. This was like, and I put myself out there, and I would, as a bass player, I'd go to like backup singer-songwriters and stuff, but I'd always have my trumpet. So I like just me like whipping out the trumpet in the middle of a set would somewhat promote that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like people knew me as a horn player. I always made sure that people knew that I did that too. I was so used to doing the multi-instrumentalist thing that I'd always like have the trumpet there and find some way to get it in.
Yeah, so you started just doing, were you doing just trumpet for those sessions?
Just trumpet, times flute, whenever, it'd come up. Okay, so the other thing was, as soon as I got back, I actually got a job working at a music store, Nick Rail Music, which is like basically like just like Summer Haze Music, but out in Southern California. It's like a band orchestral store where people rent instruments. Cool. I was working there teaching, like doing the retail side, doing sales, and then also teaching, which was awesome because it was like the first time I made any money. And and so I was like 27 years old, and it was great because I worked behind the counter. So when someone would come up for lessons, so they'd be, "Hey, do you guys have a guitar teacher?" I'd be like, "Here's my card." I mean,
yep.
Or a trumpet, everything. I would teach in any instrument, just because at one point I had like 25 students. And I like teaching. So I was doing that, but I had access to all these horns. I would literally just like, because I worked there. So that's when I really started playing saxophone. And the manager would let me take a sax to a session, and so I would, I not long after that was I like showing up with what I call my hornsenal, with like everything. As much as I could bring, I'd bring a trombone. And in those days, I had a slide trombone, and that's a tough instrument. And so I would always like wait till the end to do the trombone and hopefully run out of time and be like, "Hey, why don't you let me finish this at home?" Because I always felt more, because it's embarrassing. It's a tough instrument to play. And now I have a valve trombone that I do most of my tracking.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Wow. Man, there's so much to dig into. This is so great. So you've been doing the horn stuff and the sessions out in LA for a long time.
Yes. And that led to, so I was doing a lot of those types of horn sessions that I'm explaining, and I was working in the music store. That's how I was making my living. And I tried to build that into the horn session thing, the remote horn session thing, because this is in 2007, like where I was like, this could be a thing. I could make a good living just like, recording horns for people's records around the world, and doing it remotely. So I made a website called vhorns.com, virtualhorns.com.
Nice.
And I made cards, and I would go to the NAMM show and try and hand out my cards. No one called me from that. No, never did it work. It was just, the people that like I said, I would go play in LA at the time. There was a good amount of like, playing situations where I'd usually be playing bass. I'd get a lot of bass gigs. I use that word lightly too, because I don't ever remember getting paid for any of that stuff. But like, I don't, everybody knew me as a horn player. So I was still around in that world of singer-songwriters, artists, producers and stuff. And so when they thought of horns, they would think of me. And so I would get those gigs here and there, not enough to like live off of it or anything. And then once I went and was recommended, so it would be word of mouth, I'd get recommended. And I started playing, I did a session with this guy, Cisco Adler, they had this pop group called Swayze. It was, I don't know if you remember Swayze from around like 2007. They had a couple really big hits, top 10 hits, Rona and Lime and Buzzin'. And and so I'm there doing a session, and this was major label. So I was excited because I'm getting paid for it through the union. So I'm like doing my own union contracting. So I'm like, hey, like, you want to double on this? You want to double on that? and like I'm able to like charge for every single instrument and every overdub, every double. And then he's like, "Hey, don't you play bass too?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's, "Oh, this song needs bass. I'm playing bass. Don't you play guitar too?" "Yeah." "Don't you play keys?" I ended up playing like on almost the entire album that they were recording their second album. They already had like some success. And in that process, they asked if I wanted to come on tour with them as their DJ. And I'm not a DJ, but they're like, "Hey, we don't want to have like a record scratching DJ anymore. We want to like try and bring like a live band element," because it was just a singer and a rapper and a DJ. And so they're like, "What would be cool is if you just come and do playback." That was the extent of my DJing, was like like button, to start the track. And then I would just jam along. I had like a double keyboard set up. I had a big percussion set up with timbales and cymbals and rototoms. And I whip out my trumpet and whip out the bass and like all of it. And so I did that for 3 years. And that was like touring on another level because they were pretty big. We were doing like big shows, big opening shows, big headlining shows, headlining tours, opening tours, tour bus style, a lot of fly dates. And not long into that, I also became the tour manager of that group. So I was learning to basically, because we would fly somewhere to play a show and I'd have to have all the equipment there set up from a backline company. And I'd go pick up the bill. I'd go check into the hotel for us and things like that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a whole other set of skills that, man, I didn't even think about like that. Because, wow, yeah. Have you used those tour managing skills?
Yes, big time.
Let's hear more about it.
I mean, we could be here forever. I've got like a really long and twisty story. So I did Swayze for a few years. I hope this is interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because so after touring with Swayze, which was like, learning everything about the touring business, because I was there, when when the shit hit the fan, it hit me first every time,
Yeah.
And so I dealt with everything. It was a lot of responsibility, and then that also ran its course, and I was tired of touring. That was the main thing, because I was like out, um, 2/3 of the year, not home. And I was still, wanted to be a songwriter and a producer. Just the two don't really go together when you're doing all that. And so I left that. And then a very random thing came up where a guy was building a hotel in Cabo. And he wanted it to be an art and music hotel, and he wanted to have a recording studio in the hotel. And so I was recommended to go build and design a recording studio at this place called Hotel El Gonzo in Los Cabos, Mexico. And I'm like, all right, this is interesting. It was only going to be for 3 months at first, just to go. They wanted someone who, in my experience making studios, was like helping my friends like put together a studio in their bedroom, telling them what gear and stuff like that. and like as soon as I said yes, they're like, "All right, how do we build studio walls?" And I'm like, okay, all in Spanish, like which I didn't speak. And I literally went to Barnes and Noble and bought a book on how to build a studio. And that's where I started. It was totally one of those just say yes and figure it out later. And ended up building a really beautiful studio. I really thought like, okay, this is a hotel. It's just a room where we're going to put up some sound dampening and stuff like that. And I'm going to put together a gear list that they're going to buy and, but no, it turned into like literally like how to build the walls and the windows and everything. And so it ended up being a pretty long much longer than 3-month process. And I was living there, and the owner, he was like, he ended up asking me to stay because he didn't really have an idea. Like the hotel, has this art exchange. So if you're a visual artist, you come down, you paint a big mural on the wall in exchange for staying there and like being treated like a king and getting a free vacation with your significant other. But he wasn't sure how to structure that with the musicians. So I sort of put together the music program that we had there, and I was the music director at the hotel. And I was like, yeah, I think I got an idea of how we can do this. And I started inviting people I knew to come down and be artists in residence there.
Yeah.
And my big thing was like, okay, I built an outdoor venue so they would play a show, but we needed them to leave us with something. And at the time, I was way into, there's something called the taxi cab sessions. There was also like the Abbey Road sessions, which was these live sessions the taxi cab sessions was in a taxi cab, but Abbey Road sessions is really cool because it was like Chili Peppers and John Mayer and Radiohead playing in Abbey Road studios, performing a song. I'm like, oh, we'll do our version of that.
Yeah.
And so I had them buy me a camera, and I would like set up all the mics, set up everybody in the live room, hit record, run in, and film it. And I made this video series called the El Gonzo Sessions.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's another skill of like video stuff, and man, you've done it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So I became a videographer at that point and learned, and got way into it. We would do multiple takes and I'd edit it, and I learned Final Cut and just that, like you were asking about how my tour managing skills. Well, I was booking the artists to come down, and so I would arrange their everything for them, and host them while they're there, and take care of them and make them feel at home, and all that. So that's where those skills came in handy later, and that job.
This up El Gonzo.
Yeah, Hotel El Gonzo. Yeah, and also I'll say the thing about that job was I would eventually I wasn't just booking my friends. I was booking like the biggest artists that I could find. I was very, I'm like, okay, this needs to be a world-class music program. I have a nice offer. We would pay for flights, and it was like a good trade, for a lot of people. They all their food and drinks taken care of, an awesome vacation with a recording studio. While they weren't doing, the show and the session, which was only one day, they would get to use the studio to work on whatever they wanted to. I'd engineer for them if they needed me to, or I'd say like, bring your own engineer, and I'd always have my trumpet out. I always have my trumpet around again. And that's how I got on a lot of records, by just being there with my trumpet, because there's some big artists. I mean, this plaque was recorded there. Natalia Lafourcade, Asta La Reis, she was there. I set it up so she could come. She was there for a month working on writing and like getting most of like the basic structure and recording for that album, which won a Grammy and is now double platinum. And there's a lot of other, great Mexican artists that I played on their records, and some other U.S. artists.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
How long were you down there for then?
I lived there for 2 years, and there was a hurricane, so I also have hurricane experience. And and it destroyed the hotel, destroyed the recording studio. We were in a marina, so the ocean just came in, and the studio was in a basement. So I came back to LA and decided that I didn't want to live in Mexico anymore. I wanted to live in the States, but they kept me, and I would commute. I went down, rebuilt the recording studio, did a whole another construction project. And then for another 5 years, I commuted down there every month to host different artists.
Wow. Great.
Yeah. So I was there 7 years total with that company.
Wow. That's so cool. Yeah, all those years that you get connected with a lot of artists, and I love what you were doing. You just like had your trumpet ready to go, just like, yeah, I can do this too. Great. Like that's probably what's gotten you a lot of work then and now, is just being ready and being like I don't want to say taking advantage of the moment, but like just being prepared, of like, rather than leaving the horn in the case or leaving it in your hotel room or whatever. It's like it's there, it's ready. It's like you're letting people know, hey, I'm available to do this as well if you want, and stuff like that's
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Having that horn out, people would just see it. You play trumpet? Man, we're going to record some trumpet while we're here. They'd get excited.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a taking advantage thing. It was like a opportunity for them. And, I would almost every band while they would do their show, because I would also produce this live show, they would want me to come up and solo on a song or something, and that was like a big thing in when I was living in LA too. There was people that'd be like, hey, can you come and just jump up on a song, and I would love to do that, and
Sure,
so it's just always being willing to, like, adapt and jump up on stage and rip a solo,
Yeah.
that was a lot of, I think that, thinking back, that was a lot of good, like, self-promotion as well.
Yeah, it sounded like not quite intentional, but it still turned out great.
Yeah.
No, that's so cool. So then you moved back to LA, and what were you doing next? Just more sessions, more home studio stuff?
Yeah, so let's see here. So I was still working with El Gonzo, and I had decided I wanted to get back. And while I was doing El Gonzo, let's just say I was really focused on that mostly. And so I wasn't doing a lot of, like, recording. I would record at the studio in Cabo, and I'd work with the artists there. But I wasn't doing a lot of my own music, and I'd do horn sessions here and there. But I wasn't focused on making my own music. Let's just say that, I wasn't focused on the trumpet. I wasn't really practicing, just kept what I like to call reserve chops, where I could play for, like, 20, 25 minutes before it was like, all right, let's do something else,
Yeah.
But so what happened was, I met a friend who invited me to come do a songwrite. I was always trying to do songwriting, and when I say that, like, in the traditional pop sense, where you get into a room with each other and you write a song and produce it out. I wanted to do that. But I also was like, okay, I'm going to set up my own studio again and make music. I don't know what it is yet. And so I got invited to a songwriting session that was in the sync business. So what we call synchronization, which is basically creating music for any kind of visual media, like, whether it be commercial, TV, film, video game, anything where they are putting music behind. Because it's a big industry where if you have a song and then a TV show wants to use that song, they could license it and pay you, and you get paid. And it's it's a huge way to make money as a musician, as a producer, as a songwriter. And so I'm like, all right. And the thing was that you try to, you have to be a little bit deliberate in that business. My friend was like, I'm trying to make songs that sound like Uptown Funk. I want to do like 5 new songs that are like 5 versions of Uptown Funk, and you play horns and you songwrite, so you're the perfect guy to work with. And so I went in, we did exactly that. We made these, like, super, like, high energy, funky disco, pop songs. And after that, I got my first license for a TV show, and I'm like, this is it. This is, like, it was like the heavens opened.
Yeah.
This is how I want to make my living, And so I just went, like, both feet all the way in. I'm like, okay, I'm in this industry now. And I started building my catalog, working with as many people, like co-writing with as many people as I could that already were doing it. I signed a publishing deal, and I was still working at El Gonzo and just sort of waiting for the moment where I could leave that, because I didn't see that as my future, working at hotels.
Yeah.
So, I tried to scale it, but it just wasn't happening. It was too much work, and I wanted to make music. I wanted to get back to making music. I just had the call, and it was calling me back. And so I got back into music, and that's how I got back in, was doing sync. And my goal was to just, like, make as many songs, build as big of a catalog as I could as quickly as possible, do it as high quality. There was a big learning curve, because I had to really get good at mixing and producing and songwriting and, and doing it well, because it's like, is a high bar in that industry for what actually goes and what makes it into the big,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, and that's what you've been doing ever since.
And that's what I've been doing ever since. Yeah. And so I was doing that. Like I said, I left El Gonzo so that I could just put all my energy into that business and still doing the horn sessions. Um, and at this, so that brings, then the pandemic happened and I moved out here. I knew about Utah because of my touring days. I used to come here all the time on tour. And so I was always like, I love it here. It's a beautiful place. And the pandemic was like this opportunity to go and, somewhere else, outside of LA, because LA was a total mess at that time.
Yeah, sure.
And no one was seeing each other. No one was doing anything. And so it really opened up the remote thing that I had been trying to do, remember, since 2007.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were making music. And so I was getting horn sessions and doing a lot of like Zooms, like writing sessions. And also I do a lot of 100% music. I do a lot of what's called library production music, where it's instrumental music that I make on my own for music libraries for TV. And so between those three things, doing sync, doing production music, doing horn sessions, that's how I...
Wow. And you've been in Utah ever since.
Yeah, and I stayed. Yeah, and I loved it here. I was doing really well during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I was getting licensed, before the TV and film industry really like was hit by, COVID had like a very like delayed effect on the TV, on Hollywood, because like there was a lot of stuff that was still in production, post-production for years. And we didn't have the writer's strike yet. We didn't have the actor's strike yet and everything. That was like a kind of a tough time in my business. But previous to that was doing great.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, just proof that I didn't need to actually be in LA anymore. I could live somewhere where I could, have more space and just a chiller lifestyle, which is what I like about out here.
Yeah, I know like so many musicians where they're like, oh, I want to go to LA, I want to go to New York, and I want to make it big. And it's like, that's great. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to be there to be one of the best, right? Like, yeah, they have some of the best musicians, but there's still guys like Steve Patrick in Nashville, or Daniel Falcone in Las Vegas, or the list goes on, where they're doing just as well.
I'm all Patrick mouthpieces.
Awesome. I need to try some of this stuff. I need to come over and hang out and see your studio.
Yes.
So much fun. Yeah. No, that's so cool. So tell us more about like who some of the big artists you've done horns for recently, and kind of how that's just continued to propel you moving forward musically.
Yeah. So in the last 8 months alone, I've been able to do some really awesome projects. I worked with Olivia, well, not directly with Olivia Dean, but again, a lot of this business is knowing producers. And so it's the producers that call you for the horn sessions, not the artists, because they're working on the song. They're like, they got to figure out how to get the horns on it if they want them. And so I played on So Easy to Fall in Love, which is a massive hit right now, by Olivia Dean. And I played on a Meghan Trainor song, and her album's coming out this week. So there's one that's been released called Get In Girl, and there's another song called, I think it's called Rich Girl. And so her album is being released this week, and I'm on another song with that. There's a next month, I think, Niall Horan from One Direction is releasing a record, an album that I'm on a song on that. I work with this fantastic artist, Zenadelphia, who does like this fantastic sort of throwback, still with a modern touch music, and there's tons and tons of horns on it. And I play on almost every one of her songs. She just released an EP where I'm on a couple songs on that. But that stuff is great because I really get to stretch. And there's solos and all kinds of things going on there. I just recently did a session for a song that's in the Mario movie, the Mario's Galaxy. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. Like, that's the first time I've done anything like that. And I did that right here in Utah, that's the trip, because who else is on that? It plays on the score is Bergeron, but like he was in the studio in LA, and there's a whole scene where it's like I'm playing trumpet, trombone, all the saxes, and it's I did it right here in the room next to me.
That's so cool. Yeah, I got to come check out your space. That's awesome, because there's you found your own little niche of trumpet that isn't even live performance. I think we talked at a gig last year with the Critical Hit Collective big band of have
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, I haven't done much live stuff in a while, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I think at the time I was like, how do you do what? Because like it
Yeah.
seems like playing live is like what everybody thinks of playing the trumpet. It's playing live, whether it's a symphony or a wedding band or a big band or whatever the case is, but you've figured out how to go the route of recording and but not all I guess it sounds like more importantly not necessarily just recording horns but also producing, songwriting, getting the sync licenses, and it's been more it's like you've been able to do these cool things on horn sessions for these big artists in these movies, but it sounds like maybe quote unquote your day job is writing music for licensing. Is that an accurate way to say it?
Yeah, I mean, these days I would say it's a split between that and horn sessions. I don't just get, I named artists that you may know, but like a lot of people need horns for all kind in the sync business too. So there's people doing ads and they need horns, and all it's just like there's indie artists that like I could mention all day, that you may not have heard of that are
Right.
making their records, and I'll charge them a different rate and stuff. But still, like, I'm doing a horn session today. And I find myself doing sessions almost weekly. And then, yes, also working on library music, also working on, new sync music and releasing me. I'm also, you could go find me on Spotify or Apple Music, and I release the music, and I don't do a good job of it, but I try to like put myself out there as an artist, which is another thing, and just constantly like, just rising all the things together. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that like sync is my day job and then playing like the horn work is, I think that's definitely, they're equal at this point. Yeah, for sure. And like, we met at that big band thing, and I was just like, I'm like, you know what, I need to get out and play because I hadn't been, on a stage in a decade, and I hadn't been other than like for like jumping up and playing a song, and I hadn't been in a recording studio, which is fine. I still don't like go to recording studios. I do it here, but more like the playing thing. Like I just wanted to get together and play. I'm so glad that like that big band, Critical Hit big band is there. I just did a rehearsal with them last week, and I don't care. Like for that beauty of it is like it's fine that like you don't make any money doing it because I play in the Salt Lake Symphonic Winds. I realized that as a musician, especially as a trumpet player, I needed to like start finding ways to play out in public. And it's totally transformed my chops. Like when we met last year, I was going through as a trumpet pod. We'll have to do a part 2, man. So just talk about trumpet stuff, because where we met, you and I met, was at ITG at Tom Hooten's booth.
Yeah.
And I like was studying with Tom, and he's like, we're gonna change your embouchure if you're up for it. And that was like intense. I had to become a little baby again, and like I was like dealing with stuff I had never dealt with in terms of like chops, and it was really difficult. But I got through. I'm definitely a better trumpet player for it.
Good, yeah. I did my friend Clark Lovell does a podcast called Trust the Process, and it's all about injury and recovering from injury, and it's not specific to brass. It's like a bunch of stuff, but I did an episode on there where basically back in 2019 I almost split my lid in half internally and had to stop playing for 8 months and like relearn how to play. Wild stuff. I'll send that to you if you want to check it out. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic, and I feel like every trumpet player has to go through something like that where they totally have to change a bunch of stuff, and it's like rough. But then at the other end of it, it's like, oh yeah, that was good. That was good.
Yeah,
you're so much better because of it.
Absolutely. I had the same thing. It was like as soon as I started doing wedding gigs out here too, which are just a blow,
Oh yeah.
As soon as I started doing full gigs, being on stage playing trumpet for a couple hours, this cut that I had back in college, last time I would do that, I would, just this, it returned right in the same spot. And and I'm like, man, this is not gonna fly. I'm just gonna destroy my chop. And it was scary when it would like cross over into I'm doing a session and I'm like, shoot, I gotta like do this tomorrow because I can't even like,
Yeah.
so
Man, yeah. In those moments, what do you do to get centered, work through the gig, and still deliver on, this other product that you have? Like, what are some tricks or things that you try and do to be able to still be at the top of your game despite other gigs and other things that you've been doing?
Well, now it's just so different since I, like when I was in the process of doing the embouchure change, like it was just whatever. Like honestly, it was like whatever, I could.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's nothing you can do, like I felt like so I would make an excuse and put it off a day, like this, like a recording. I'm not saying that you should do that, but I wanted to deliver the best product possible. So, I'm able to play another. I was like, okay, I'm just going to work on the saxes today and get those all done and and then just do trumpet on fresh chops tomorrow. Well, because I'd get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not producing sound. Now this was during the top change, but now I will say that it's just about sticking to the fundamentals that I've picked up over the last year studying with Tom. I took a lesson with Josh Kaufman. That's been really great. Showed me this a couple things that he does. One of them being like a whisper G. Did you ever take a lesson with him?
Yeah, I've taken a couple. Yeah.
Did he talk about the whisper G with you?
I think we did. We might have briefly gone over it.
It's just, he starts and ends every day with just, whisper G, not necessarily like the super whisper G, just a really soft G to center. And then he does this, what I call the reverse bend, where it's like you go G, F sharp, and then you let go of the thing and stay on the F sharp.
Yeah.
Like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that really helps me. Josh has helped me. Steve, just through email, because that's why I love Patrick mouthpieces, not just because they're great mouthpieces, but like he's always like, I wanted to get a lesson with him, but like he's so busy doing so many things that he just gives me like gems in email. He's like, yeah, let the mouthpiece do the work, get the right. Now that he knows what mouthpieces I play on, because I have like 5 of his mouthpieces.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it just sounds like you're not like, letting the mouthpiece do the work in this case. And so that's a big thing, playing with no pressure, minimal pressure. I have this right here. Tom got me into, this is called the torture device. I hang my trumpet from here. And do zero pressure exercise and I try to play every day. That's it. Try and not just play, but like I do a routine. Schlossberg, stamp, fundamentals. That's what's been key. And now that I've been doing it for a little over a year, it's just like now it's in maintenance mode. I don't feel like I'm getting to those points where it's like, oh shoot, I can't play anymore.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's super helpful. And then a couple of questions, and maybe we can do a part 2 sometime. But there's different online companies that I've seen at least that are doing freelance horn sessions or whatever. There's Air Gigs, Sound Better, Musiversal, a handful of others. Have you?
Yeah, I'm on Sound Better.
Okay.
I use it. I still get calls every once in a while from Sound Better, and it's like hit and miss. I've met people on Sound Better that I still work with, and yeah, I say get up there for sure. If you're recording from home, which everybody should, every trumpet player should get into for sure. And that's a great place to start. Get on all of them. When I first got on Sound Better, I was like, okay, I'm going to hit this hard. I'm going to be the first person that shows up when you search horns trumpet on Sound Better. And for a while I was. And so I made that my goal.
Yeah.
And I didn't have like a lot of huge credits at that time. And so, but it was a good way to learn. It takes a while to learn how to sort of charge that, like how to charge for your time and your value and everything like that. And the thing with Sound Better is that, the general clients that are there are looking for a deal. And so these days I get less of them because I still quote what I like the minimum that I want to get paid to do something. And I get a lot of passes because people are there looking for, budget.
Yeah.
But I did a sound better session like a couple months ago. I get that email, like I reply and let them know. So
And if it works,
yeah, I highly suggest using them.
Okay, cool. And then for those players who were like, okay, I've been listening to Mark, I want to start getting into this too. Besides getting the equipment and learning how to produce and record and all that stuff, how to find those opportunities. What would you recommend and suggest, especially since things are so different now with the internet and the digital age and stuff? What are some recommendations you have for starting to get into that recording scene and doing the homework kind of stuff?
So I think that there's a lot to be said to just start making music. Don't wait. Just like be a multi-instrumentalist. It's not going to take that long. Get your like, especially if like no one's gonna like rent out a studio and put together the budget and the arrangements and everything to like have you come in and record. It's very, very rare. It's just so rare that you might do it once a year if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So, create the environment first. Be that person, make songs, figure out how to make whatever it is, even if it's just trumpet music, figure out how to make the background. If you want like a really good guitar player, get your buddy that plays guitar to play on it. Learn how to record it. Start and do things, like for not without making money, because when in the sync business, I created my entire catalog without getting paid to do it. It's like being an artist. You make all the paintings and then you put them up on the wall and then you sell them.
Yeah.
So like just start doing it. The thing about being a multi-instrumentalist is like you pick up a new instrument, you'll be good at that instrument in like 3 years, but you got to start at some point. Think about like where you were as a trumpet player when, where we were as a trumpet player freshman year in high school as opposed to senior year. It's like it only took 4 years to like become super advanced, and now we're older and we have, and just our ability to learn and pick up new things is easier. So like just start making music, whatever it is, figure out like the process and be part of it. And then, like I said, just, man, I would reach out to producers on Instagram and just be like, hey, you have a horn guy?
Yeah.
I play the horns, and if you're new, offer it for cheap, or just do like a one for free or something like that, just to get that relationship going. But like put yourself out there like that. Don't like a lot of the people, if you're young, if you know talented musicians, like work with them, because like 10 years down the line, you don't know where they're going to be. My buddy Julian, I went to high school with him, and now he's one of the biggest producers in the world. He produced all the Sabrina Carpenter hits and Teddy Swims, Lose Control, and he's a legend. And we were in high school big band together. But that wasn't just lucky. That was when I moved back to LA. I was like, who's still doing this? What do you need, man? I'm there. Not the trash. Like
being willing to help. It's one of the even stuff like that's like makes a big difference. Yeah. So my last question, then we can wrap up here. But what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger about the music business?
Oh God, that's a heavy question. I would say two things. One is to just keep going, keep going, keep taking big swings, keep swinging at it.
Yeah.
Just know that like, because I did keep swinging, but like I sure beat myself up with that bat along the way. A lot goes on in here in this business because you're going to take a lot of swings and you're going to miss a lot of swings, and you're going to, you're going to deal with a lot of rejection and a lot of no's, and there's going to be wins and there's going to be losses. And those losses feel like it's the end, often. You can make it feel like that. And so that, it's just like about like keep going, have grit, try to like move past, all these things that I mentioned that has happened for me in the last 8 Months, the Mario movie, Olivia Dean, everything. It feels awesome and really glad those things happen. But I'm like seriously like sitting here like, all right, what's next? You know?
Yeah.
It doesn't give me any like necessarily like level of like, all right, no, I'm good, you know, like so like I gotta keep going. And the other thing is to be like really critical of yourself. Be like your best like critic and try to like learn to be honest with yourself and you know, as best as you can. Sometimes it's like you think that you're there, but you're just not, and that can mess with you too. Like be like, all right, well, sorry, this is gonna take another, you know, day or year or whatever, you know, to get to that like level. And I what I mean is like that you're producing and creating or playing at a certain level. Like you have to be honest with yourself and push yourself to get there. And because you know the bar is really high in general, all across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this has been great, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all this stuff. Man, you opened up another world to me, and I'm like, wow, now I got to write another chapter. Now I'm a little upset. That's just going to take more time. No, it's great. This has been so much fun.
Well, come by and let's like, you know, hang and play some duets and talk about your book.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll do a part 2. Maybe we can even do it at the studio.
Okay. Yeah. Do it. Sounds great. Thank you. Catch you soon.
All right, man. Good talking.
You too.